Hey, my people. It has been a little while. However, as always, I am hoping that all of you are relatively well, and I am sending all of the positive vibes, prayers, and well wishes your way. I'm hoping that on this day, that if nothing else, you all are getting just a wee bit of rest, especially today being Juneteenth. There's a few reasons why I wanted to make sure that I posted today. For one, I've been reflecting on the fact that it was a year ago exactly that I did my first YouTube video, and it was inspired by today. It was inspired by Juneteenth. It was inspired by Black history, and just reflecting on some of the unfortunate struggles that not only have we faced in the past, but unfortunately still face today, and particularly with Black women. And so I just wanted to take a moment to just acknowledge today. For many of us, today can be a bit heavy because, we're constantly reminded by the pains that have existed in the past. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, there are still some pains that we still experience daily. And so I think that for some of us, it's also a celebration, because even with having to experience certain things, we are still able to remind ourselves of our resilience and the power that we hold just by being who we are. And so I want to remind you of that today, that despite every challenge, every barrier, every struggle that we've had to face just because of the color of our skin, we have overcame quite a bit as well. And we still continue to overcome. And that's something to be proud of. I don't know about y'all, but I'm proud. I'm proud to be a Black person, a Black woman, because I feel that, the best way, to really know your strength is to see how you come out on the other side. And the fact that we continue to persevere despite some people not necessarily wanting us to win, we still win. And so I feel like this is, not only a individual journey as far as the struggles that we face, but also a collective journey. And I feel like it's something to be proud of. We're still here. We are still here. Whether they like it or not, we are still here. Another reason that I wanted to make this video today is to just validate, some of the things that often comes up, particularly, being a Black woman. We tend to not only experience a lot of pressure from outside of ourselves, but also quite a bit of pressure inwardly, where I think this is where some of the terminology of, mental slavery comes in, where sometimes we don't realize when we can be free. And because for so long we were not in so many different ways, we don't allow ourselves to experience or give ourselves permission to experience the freedom that we have now, and one of the things that comes to my mind is, being able to choose what we're going to do on a day like today. For some of us, unfortunately, we may still have to work, or sometimes we may choose to work because bills still have to get paid. However, there are some of us who choose, you know, the phrase that comes up often is rest is resistance, you know, and I know there's been publishings, you know, with that as well. But, you know, I think that oftentimes guilt, shame, and other things come up for some of us. And I hear this a lot, especially with Black women who I work with pretty regularly in my private practice, that this idea of like, I can't rest because when I do rest or when I do stop, I feel like I need to be productive. I need to be doing something. And, you know, sometimes because of that inward tug, or maybe because for so long that's what we've been told and even society promotes, even when we actually can choose differently, we don't, because we give into maybe that anxiety. We give into, you know, that pressure that comes from the outside of us that now we've accepted and placed on ourselves. And so, for one, I want to validate that because I've definitely experienced that personally. You know, just over the last 4 months, you know, I have been experiencing some new challenges. You know, a lot of new blessings, a lot of great things have happened, but life has also been lifing. And quite frankly, you know, I have really been trying to practice what I preach in regards to when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling stressed, when there's a lot of things that you're feeling like you're juggling. You know, I tell my clients, simplify to the best of your ability, right? Oftentimes, it's almost like we're programmed that when we're stressed and overwhelmed, we go harder. We're like, nope, 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 can't be stressed. Nope, 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 can't slow down. Nope, 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 can't stop, won't stop. You know what I'm saying? But the reality is, you know, we can either choose to keep pushing and burn ourselves out, or we can choose ourselves and say, you know what, let me just take an inventory of what I have going on and what can be delegated, what can be pushed off to another day, another week, another month. You know, does this really have to be addressed right now? You know, because your health and your well-being is important too. Because guess what? If you can't go on because health, you know, restricts you or, you know, whatever the case might be, then those things still would have to figure themselves out. People, you know, that rely on us would have to figure it out, right? If we're down and out, it would just have to be figured out. And so some of it, I think that, you know, we can validate and have self-compassion and, you know, remind ourselves that some of this is just like programmed, you know, behavior that we've learned, you know, but just like we can learn things, we can totally unlearn things. Just saying. So I want to validate that that is many of our experiences. And I say our because, again, this is something that sometimes I have to remind myself of, you know. So, like, you know, as much as I mentally wanted to make more of these videos since the last time that you guys saw me, I took my own advice and I said, you know what, I'm going to simplify. I'm going to prioritize myself, my well-being, the things that, you know, really, 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 really needs my focus right now, and everything else will just have to get pushed, right? And so that kind of leads me to the third reason that I wanted to make this video. I really want to encourage you all, you know, those of you who are watching and listening, to every now and again just check in. You know, I am considering this a check-in. You know, I want to encourage you all to take those moments to check in with yourself. See where you're at. A day like today is a perfect time to check in. Mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. You know, how am I doing? How am I feeling? How are things going for me? Am I happy? Am I content with life right now? And, you know, it's okay if the answer is no, right? What I often tell people is it's okay if it's no, not yet, you know, but things could get better. And some of it is dependent on the choices we make moving forward. Some things we can't control. Some things we just can't control. And so hopefully those things we can learn over time to accept, you know, that we can't control it and focus on what we can. And so the what we can part is, one of the things is, you know, how do we respond to the things that we have going on that we can't control? You know, are there things that we can do differently in our lives so that we can be better, and not better in the sense of like doing more, pushing ourselves more, doing the most, you know, but more so doing better, healthier. You know, am I doing the best that I can to be well, right? And so consider this a check-in. You know, I think it's something that honestly can be implemented daily as like a daily self-care habit. It's something I encourage my clients to do all the time. And I try to also do this myself, you know, where sometimes I'll just simply just take a moment, I'll do a couple of deep breaths, and I'll just ask myself, like, you know, how are you doing? You know, be your own best friend. Validate yourself. Take care of yourself. Check in with yourself. And then one of the other questions that I like to include with this check-in is also, what do I need? What do I need? Because I can almost guarantee you that if you take a second, you get silent, you get quiet, allow yourself and give yourself permission to just stop for a minute and really and truly and genuinely ask yourself, what do you need? Your body will tell you. Your body will tell you. There's been times where I noticed that I might have felt a little bit more overwhelmed or a little bit anxious and not really sure why. And I have tried to make it a habit that as soon as I notice it, I just stop. Because I can spare 30 seconds of my day to just stop, right? And I'll stop and I'll say, what is it that you need, Moriah? What is it that you need right now in this moment? And sometimes my body will say, get up and go take a walk. Sometimes my body will say, rest. And, you know, I try to make sure that that's a priority that day. If rest is, because rest can look differently as well. Rest might be taking a nap. Rest might be just turning off the TV, having total silence, not doing anything for 5 minutes. You know, it can be many things. But the point is, you have to take the moment to tune in with yourself to figure out what that thing is. I tell people all the time, self-care is self-love. And no one really and truly knows the love that you need better than you. Sometimes what often happens is our internal, you know, intuition or whatever you might want to call it just tends to get quiet because it's for so long been surrounded by noise. And so the only way to tap back into that is to get quiet. Get quiet, get restful, and check in. And so my encouragement for you today on this Juneteenth, as you celebrate or as you do whatever you decide to do, I'm encouraging you to take a minute to just rest within yourself and check in. Be well as always, and hopefully I will see you soon. Until next time.